Hello and welcome to this special election edition of Arirang News. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye. Thanks for joining us on the day of Korea's local elections. We have the latest polling results as well as an in-depth analysis on them for you tonight.
Right, and now let's start off by taking a look at the fresh voting results that are pouring in with our Hwang Ji-hye, who joins us in the studio.
So, Ji-hye, we've been seeing tight races from the exit polls, but how does the real result look like?
Right, the results as of 9:30 p.m. also show a lot of gray areas, but by taking a look at this graphic map, we're seeing clear favorites of the ruling Saenuri Party in the bottom right, the southeast region, which means the ruling party managed to be ahead of its rival candidates in its traditional strongholds, whereas on the bottom left, the southwest regions, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, or NPAD, is taking a strong lead, managing to do the same.
Well, earlier exit poll data showed that in terms of the Seoul mayoral race, the incumbent mayor Park Won-soon had about a 10-point lead against his rival, but the actual election results seem to show a more dramatic difference.
Yes, Park Won-soon from the main opposition party is ahead of its rival Chung Mong-jun from the ruling Saenuri Party by more than 20 percentage points. Rival candidates for the Seoul mayorship made various promises to improve safety in the city, and an issue that has aroused public concern following the deadly ferry disaster last month.
And the areas surrounding Seoul, they were the regions that were showing very tight races according to exit polls, right?
Right. And it's still showing a very tight race. And in Gyeonggi province, Nam Kyung-pil, who's a very well-recognized figure in Korean politics from the ruling Saenuri Party, is winning over his rival Kim Jin-pyo by around 5 percentage points. So again, we're seeing a tight race here. And in another highly contested region, Incheon, there's candidate Yoo Jung-bok from the ruling Saenuri Party and incumbent opposition mayor Song Yeong-gil, and Yoo is currently winning over Song by about 3 percentage points. So another tight race over here.
Well, take us to some of the regions outside of the capital area. Where are we focusing our attention? Yeah,
one is Busan, which is a traditional stronghold of the ruling Saenuri Party. And the ruling party candidate Seo Byung-soo is actually seen one of the key aide of President Park Geun-hye, and Seo for now is taking the lead by slightly less than 8 percentage points against his rival, independent candidate Oh Go-don. Gwangju, on the other hand, is the Liberals' power base, and their election results show that the NPAD's Yoon Chang-hyun is likely to win against the independent Kang Un-tae. In Daegu also, the results are showing some clear win for the opposition, for the ruling party candidate Kwon Young-jin, actually, and the real winners are expected to emerge in a couple of hours, so we'll have to wait until then for the real results to show up.
Exactly. The political ideologies by region really stood out really there. But walk us through the exit poll results. We've been referring to them so far.
Yeah, 7 regions are highly contested according to the exit polls out of the 17 metropolitan mayor and governor posts. And among the 10 remaining regions, ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy are each doing better in 5 regions.
All right, Ji-hye, a lot of information to digest here, but thank you very much for that report.
Thank you.
The final voter turnout for this local election was the highest in 16 years. The National Election Commission says this is because of the first ever adopted early voting system.
But the total turnout still fell short of the expected 60%. Our Yoo-Rian tells us more.
A total of 56.8% of eligible voters took part in this local election, making it the second highest participation rate in the past 5 local elections. Breaking it down by the most contested regions, Gangwon-do, Chungcheong-북도, and Chungcheong-namdo saw a relatively high voter turnout ranging from 55 to 62%. Cities of Daejeon and Busan was at 54 and 55.6% respectively. In the capital region, Incheon and the populous Gyeonggi-do province saw turnouts fall on the lower side, both at around 53%, while in the capital city of Seoul, it was just above the average at 58.6%.
사전투표 제도가 도입되었기 때문에 The voter turnout increased because of the early voting system that allowed people to vote anywhere, regardless of their home address.
The early voting system was adopted for the first time ever last week, and it saw a higher than expected voter turnout of 11.5%. Kim says many people took advantage of the early voting system so they could plan trips on election day. But the final 56.8% voter turnout still fell short of the widely anticipated 60% rate. Some pundits had predicted the Seoul affair disaster to pull up voter participation rates given recent anti-government sentiment, but it seems it has only worked to turn voters away from politics. Yurian, Arirang News.
Now, as we've been saying, vote counting is very much underway, and our Shin Se-min is standing by at the ballot counting center located in the Chunggu District Community Center. Se-min, tell us more.
Over 3 hours have passed since the ballot counting process began, and the ballots collected from this Wednesday, the election day, as well as the early voting period, are being counted at 252 ballot counting stations nationwide. So far, a 5.9% of all ballots have been counted, and the tally for mayoral and provincial governor posts for Seoul stands at 1.43%, while the count in the Gyeonggi-do province stands at 3.92% as of 9:50 p.m. Korea time. Now, the process is going smoothly, but it does involve multiple verification processes to ensure fairness and transparency. And just like many other counting stations, citizen observers are allowed to oversee the counting procedures up close. The National Election Commission is also showing the counting process online in real time. And in case of emergency arises during this process, police officers and firemen are on full standby right outside the counting station.
And Se-min, I understand that there were some moderate changes this year to the counting process because of criticism over some inconsistencies with the 2012 presidential election. Can you walk us through some of these changes?
Right, citizens starting this year for the first time in local election history are taking part in the ballot counting process for this year. And this is to boost transparency and reduce concerns of vote tampering. The Election Commission is using new ballot counting machines in some areas and employing a 3-step check system to minimize any possible mistakes. And after putting the ballots through machines, ballot counters will then manually count and recheck the ballots. Then the votes go to the Election Commission officials who are on site for final count. And that's all I have for now. Reporting live from Chunggu District here in Seoul, this has been Shin Se-min.
Ruling Saenuri Party lawmakers are on standby at party headquarters near the National Assembly in Seoul's Yeouido area, and that's where our Ji Myung-gil is standing by. So, Myung-gil, it's been about 4 hours since we got the exit poll data. The actual election result tallies are coming in. What's the environment there like right now?
Well, yes, there hasn't been much commotion yet, as lawmakers are cautiously monitoring the neck-and-neck regions. The ruling Saenuri Party candidates do seem to be having the upper hand in 12 hotly contested mayoral and provincial governor posts around the nation. Once confirmation comes in on the results, they will be reflected on a bulletin board, which sits beneath the pictures of the ruling party candidates. Winners are expected to emerge around 11 p.m. Korea time, although the results for closely contested constituencies could come out as early as Thursday morning. Most Saenuri Party candidates have not appeared here at the Situation Room and are monitoring the situation at their respective camps.
If you look at the capital city of Seoul, currently the main opposition's candidate, the incumbent mayor, Park Won-soon, is outpacing his ruling party rival Chung Mong-jun by a big margin. What significance does that hold?
Well, the Seoul mayorship carries extra weight in Korean politics as it is seen as a stepping stone to the presidential ticket. The former Seoul mayor Lee Myung-bak was elected president in 2002, running on his accomplishments as a top administrator of the city. The Saenuri Party members have not yet given an official reaction towards the Saenuri Party's Seoul mayoral candidate Chung Mong-jun, who is trailing behind Park Won-soon of the main opposition party who is seeking re-election. This whole mayoral post has also long been an important governmental post for the president to go forward with managing state affairs and getting support for reform drives in the country. This was Kim Young-gil reporting live from Saenuri Party headquarters in Seoul.
All right, thank you, Myung-gil. Now let's connect live with our Kwon So-hwa, who's at the National Assembly, where the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is also closely monitoring the exit polls. So earlier you told us about the atmosphere in the Situation Room there being quite reserved. How is the mood there now?
Well, guys, things haven't changed that much during the last 2 hours or so here at the New Politics Alliance for Democracy Situation Room. It is pretty quiet here. It has been throughout the day with or without the members of the party present. And in fact, many of them have left after having dinner. This includes floor leader Park Young-sun, who earlier seemed to be satisfied by the very first exit polls. I saw her smiling and nodding at times. Now, and earlier in the day, she also gave a short speech here in the afternoon asking that people cast their precious votes as the turnout at the time seemed to be on the low side. A voter turnout close to 60% was said to be in favor for the main opposition party. Recent predictions, however, say the voter turnout will be at around 57%, so we will have to see how this turns out for the main opposition party. Meanwhile, at around 10 p.m., the NPAD co-leaders Kim Han-gil and An Chol-soo are expected to arrive at the Situation Room.
Now, so these elections are very interesting this time around because we've been saying that the ruling party might be punished for the April ferry disaster, but looking at all these tight races in so many regions, this may not be so.
Well, over the last few days, the NPAD has been expressing its concerns over so-called hidden votes by conservative voters and also uncertainties about the swing regions. There were said to be 10 to 11 swing regions. The party was, however, expecting its candidates to win the Seoul mayoral race as well as races in their traditional strongholds of Jeolla-Bukdo and Jeolla-Namdo in the southwest of the country. And the exit polls show candidates Song Ha-jin and Lee Na-kyun are favored to win. It's a different story in the swing regions of Gyeonggi-do Province, Incheon, Chungcheong Province, as the numbers are also swinging at every hour. The NPAD is very glad, however, that their mayoral candidate Yoon Jang-hyun in Gwangju is likely to win over independent candidate Kang Un-tae, who seemed to be a strong rival in earlier opinion polls. Now, I'll be back with more updates later here at the NPAD Situation Room when we get a clearer image of the election results.
All right, so thank you very much for that. Well, in nearly all elections here in Korea in recent memory, swing voters have played the deciding factor in the fate of the candidates, and today's elections are certainly no exception.
That's right. Experts say voters in their 40s will most likely hold the key this time around. Our Na Hyun-kyung has more on these game changers.
It's become an established fact in Korea that those in their 50s and older tend to support the conservatives, while people in their 30s and younger lean toward liberal parties. That usually leaves people in their 40s making up most of the swing votes. Experts say the Park Geun-hye administration's handling of the Seoul ferry disaster has changed today's election dynamics in many ways.
Swing voters who saw Prime Minister nominee An Dae-hee withdraw his nomination due to personal ethical issues felt the government was not trustworthy. If a lot of those voters head to the polls, they will likely sway the election results.
But it's not just the ruling party that's being hurt.
There's bound to be a so-called incumbent advantage because the campaign came to a halt for a few weeks due to the ferry disaster. That made it very difficult for challenging candidates to establish their positions.
As for the roughly 12% of the electorate who came out for last week's two-day early voting, most experts say it's unlikely that this will pump up the turnout.
If people take Thursday off, they can go on a long holiday because Memorial Day falls on Friday. So I think those who participated in the early voting are probably people who were going to vote anyway, but can't because of their schedule, meaning there won't be a drastic increase in the overall voter turnout.
All that remains now is to see how many people head to the polls and for their ballots to be counted. 나현경, Arirang News.
Now let's spend some time looking forward. The election results are, of course, expected to have a significant impact on Korea's political landscape over the coming months.
And as our Park Ji-won reports, they could be a good indicator of what to expect in the next presidential race.
The results of the June 4th local elections will significantly change the political landscape of Korea. If the ruling camp wins the election, despite harsh public criticism against the incumbent government following its poor handling of the ferry disaster, the Park Geun-hye administration could gain enough political momentum to steer the state affairs for the rest of her term. The government's ambitious policy goals, which include deregulation reforms and a 3-year plan for economic innovation, may also gain political support. However, if the ruling Saenuri Party loses to opposition camps, not only in its traditionally weak regions, but also in regions where neck-and-neck races are expected, the Conservative Party will be in a turmoil starting from an upcoming party convention scheduled in July. Politicians inside the party who are close to President Park will most likely be held responsible. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy will also face diverging scenarios according to the results of the elections. If it wins the elections, the late March merger of the former main opposition Democratic Party and political icon An Chol-soo's New Political Vision Party will gain the justification it so desperately needs. The co-leadership of Kim Han-gil and An Chol-soo will be strengthened in preparing for the next general elections and eventually the next presidential election. But in the case that the main opposition loses in major neck-and-neck race regions, the co-leadership will be significantly hurt, and the fledgling party could face the danger of being embroiled in factional strife. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And to give us an expert's view on the elections, Professor Robert Kelley from Busan National University is joining us. Thanks so much for making the time for us tonight. It may still be too early on in the tally, but how are you reading the voter sentiment from the polling results so far?
Sure. So far, the elections in the southern part of the country, in the southwest and the southeast, have gone pretty much according to expectation. I think maybe the most interesting race that we've seen so far would be the Busan mayoralty. I live in Busan, where traditionally this is Saenuri country. This is the kind of area where conservative candidates should do pretty well. And the independent candidate here in Busan has actually given the Saenuri candidate a run for his money. So I think that's important. That may reflect the unhappiness over Seoul. They may have depressed some conservative turnout or driven people to other candidates. I think the more important issue where we still really don't know, where maybe again we're seeing the Seoul effect, is in the northern provinces of South Korea, where all the races are really still up in the air. And this may be the, like I said, the impact of the ferry, where people are really undecided and people are voting for independent voters and people really aren't coming out and turning out for the government party. So, right now, the areas sort of in the south that we kind of expected, those have more or less fallen the way we expected them to. It's really in the northern part of the country where things are really up in the air.
Right, and we've been seeing the ruling party being shaken a bit from a lot of its strongholds and its positions. What would the scenario be like if the ruling party did lose this time around? How would that affect President Park's presidency moving forward?
Sure, I think there are two sort of important things. The first is that it will congeal, I think as your reporter appropriately mentioned, it will help congeal the opposition party, the new Alliance for Democracy Party, whatever it is, right? It's only a couple months old and it's still sort of coming together. An Chol-soo is sort of an outside character. We don't quite know how he's going to fit into things. He kind of flamed out a couple of years ago, but now he's back, right? So the NPAD, pardon me, right, it really needs to come together. It really needs to sort of show that it's a coherent force, that it's not just sort of the Democratic Party repackaged and the rest of it. So if they win tonight, this is big for them. It's a big step, and then they can push the president and the national level much harder. I think that's the first issue. The second issue is that in the National Assembly, the left-wing opposition seat holders in the National Assembly will feel much emboldened by this. They will feel stronger, and they will fight Park's legislation and other things coming through the National Assembly much harder. This will be seen as sort of like a test, as like a bellwether of Korean opinion on her presidency. And if Park's party goes down tonight, then it's going to reinvigorate opposition in the National Assembly.
But the fact that we have so many contested regions so far shows the main opposition party may not be the obvious alternative for many people either. So what does it say about Korean voters and political parties of today?
Yeah, one of the interesting things about Korea is how many independent candidates there are floating around. Like I said, in the case of Busan, where I live, the primary opponent to the Saenuri Party candidate is independent, right? He's sort of a non-party character, sort of represents himself as like a local boy and like a technocrat and things like that. That's actually one of the interesting things about Korea. What it does tell us, I think, from a political science point of view, is that Korea's political parties are still finding their way. They're still not really deeply rooted in civil society. They still don't have like a lot of resonance with the population. The parties here change their names a lot, and people sort of move in and out of different parties and stuff. And that's, I think, partially a reflection of the fact that Korean democracy is young. It's only 30 years or so, right? And it's also because I think ideology doesn't quite play such a big role in Korean parties. Personality plays a big role. We saw that in the contest between Lee Myung-bak and Park Geun-hye in the past. We see that now with the role of An Chol-soo, where he's sort of like this big character who's kind of popped out of nowhere, right? And so as Korea's parties become more institutionalized over time, the role of personality will fade, and this sort of party flip-flopping, the name changing, will cease. But for right now, I think you're correct. I mean, South Korea's liberal opposition party doesn't really suck up all the non-government votes because there are a lot of independents running around.
Now, concentrating on the fact that we have so many tight races in so many regions, what happens tomorrow or the rest of the year or for the rest of the President Park's presidency? How do you think the parties are going to take this division in voters and react?
Sure. I think the most important thing we need to learn in the next few days, and we just can't figure this out tonight, is how much Seoul impacted people's voting choices, right? A couple of weeks ago in the media, I mean, people were saying Park Geun-hye should resign, people on the left and stuff like that. I mean, it was a really big deal. It was all over the place. She had to give the big speech and everything. And I think a lot of people expected that tonight there was going to be like this sort of Seoul wave that was going to push conservative candidates out across the country. That doesn't seem to be materializing yet, so Park may have gotten lucky. But we need to find out in the next week or so why people voted. And if Seoul really impacted the vote, if Seoul turns out to have moved the votes maybe 5 or 10%, then people are going to really start to demand that Park Geun-hye govern differently. I think that she might be, people might suggest that she should bring some opposition people into the government. I've heard that suggestion thrown around, that she might have to put more technocrats into her cabinet and staff rather than her friends and the people that she knows well. Right, a lot of it depends on how Seoul shakes out and whether or not the opposition can say, look, we won because of this tragedy and you need to change. And we just don't know that yet. It's going to take another 2 weeks for that to shake out. But like I said, we all expected that to happen, so I still think it's in the cards.
All right, Professor Kelley, we certainly look forward to hearing your thoughts in 2 weeks after all of this has been juggled around. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Well, it was not just Koreans who headed to the polls today. The largest number of foreigners ever also exercised their rights to vote.
Exactly. Korea is actually the only Asian country that allows foreigners to vote in local elections. And our Connie Kim tells us more.
Chinese national Liu Changjun has voted for the first time in Korea. She first came to Korea in 2008 and is mostly interested in issues related to multinational families.
I'm nervous to have voted for the first time. I voted for candidates that support multicultural families and are interested in creating new jobs for women like me.
Yu is one of the nearly 50,000 foreign voters who were able to vote in local elections in the nation. Since 2006, foreigners who have had permanent residency status for more than 3 years have been eligible to vote. Korea is the only nation in Asia that allows foreigners to vote in local elections, although they are not allowed to cast ballots in presidential and general elections. Although foreign voters take up just 0.1% of the total number of voters in Korea, the figure is expected to grow. The number of eligible foreign voters is at its highest level this year at about 48,000, jumping about fourfold since 2010. To boost the voting rate of foreign immigrant women, which make up about 48% of the nation's immigrant population, the Korea Federation of Immigrant Women was established in April.
Many qualified foreign voters do not know they are eligible to vote. We will continue to educate those foreign women on the merits of democracy and why they should have an interest in politics.
The National Election Commission hopes to help foreign voters settle into Korean society by helping them exercise a right to vote in these local elections. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
South Korea reiterated Wednesday that it's not considering adopting a U.S.-designed missile defense system. Seoul's defense ministry said that there has not been any consultations between Seoul and Washington on that issue. The missile defense THAAD system can strike medium and intermediate range ballistic missiles mid-air during their terminal phase. The ministry added that the South Korean military is developing its own low-altitude missile defenses that can effectively intercept North Korean missiles. Amid a flurry of diplomatic activities to restart the long-stalled six-party nuclear talks, questions are rising on whether China should do more in bringing North Korea back to the negotiating table. Our Hwang Ji-hye asked that question to Professor Joe Witt, a former U.S. State Department official specializing in North Korean issues.
So I think there are limits to how far China will go. And I think we need to take it upon ourselves to figure out how to solve this problem. We can't rely on China. And particularly speaking as an American, U.S.-Chinese relations, as you know, are not so great at the moment. It's hard for me to comprehend how we can think that China is going to solve this problem for us when our bilateral relationship is not so good. It doesn't make any sense.
How can we solve perhaps this North Korea issue without China?
I think Washington and South Korea should basically inform China that we don't see much hope for resuming the six-party talks. We understand that there are limits to what China can do, and therefore the United States and South Korea are going to approach North Korea directly. And will keep China informed, but they won't be the middleman anymore.
Do you think the format of the six-party talks has perhaps passed its expiry date? Do we need a new format?
You know, I think that so much time has passed since the six-party talks have been held that it may be worthwhile, rather than clinging to the past, that we do a total review of where we are, where we're going, and how do we avoid the consequences of a North Korea with a growing stockpile of nuclear weapons. So it may be, we should reconsider whether the six-party talks are worthwhile as a forum for future dialogue.
Now, staying with North Korea, which is considered one of the most secretive and isolated countries in the world, the regime is reportedly taking steps to open its doors to foreign tourists. That's according to an unnamed Chinese travel agency official who says Pyongyang plans to reopen tours to Paektusan Mountain as early as this month. The tour route borders the Chinese city of Halong and has been closed off since February of last year after North Korea conducted its third nuclear test. The travel agency official who spoke to Yonhap News Agency says the two-day mountain tour will only be available to Chinese nationals and cost about $175. If approved, it would represent another attempt by North Korea to increase its tourism revenues from China as it seeks to shore up much-needed foreign currency reserves.
The month of May was one to remember for Korean automakers in the United States. Kia Motors America says it sold more than 60,000 cars last month for the first time ever, a 15% jump from a year earlier. The company attributed the bumper month to high demand for the redesigned Optima sedan and its compact Seoul model. Hyundai Motor America also